I am here with Dr. Kalpakche, and my name is Marie-Paul de Valdivia, and we are so glad to welcome you. We didn't know this actually, but to this workshop that actually builds on Alan's fabulous presentation that he just gave. So he talked a lot about emotions and the medley of emotions that come up for families. He talked about the importance, and we so believe, well, you know, a lot of us have Alan as a mentor, so it's not really a surprise, but he talked about fear and the importance of managing fear. And this workshop is all about that. This workshop is we're going to do a deep dive into fear. So welcome. I am going to share my screen. All right. So as treaters, fear is one of those emotions. I mean, Alan talked about so many emotions, right? And they're all really important because they all give us like a little message or a big message. But fear is one of those emotions that is practically always on our radar. Fear and its siblings and extended family, like anxiety and worry and concern and vigilance and panic, is really quite adaptive. And Ali is going to talk a whole lot more about that, but it is here to keep us and those we love safe, right? Fear comes up when there's a danger to our well-being and the well-being of those we love. So it's something that demands action. And as such, well, it's darn uncomfortable because it wants us to move, it wants us to do something. And that's a good thing, because that's exactly what would, in a moment of immediate exquisite fear, that is exactly what we need to do. It encourages us to pay attention. But in our world, the world of all of us here, of mental ill health, and particularly borderline personality disorder, fear shows up in so many ways and contexts for everyone. Not just the person who struggles with the disorder, but the siblings and the parents and the spouses. Everybody feels fear. And the resolution is not easy. The resolution, I mean, it's not like there's an easy answer. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having all these conferences. So our purpose here today is to help in a very specific way, really, truly building on what we couldn't have asked for a better setup, building on what Alan talked about, and help in this way with that, with the goal that managing fear will help foster a healthier family environment.
Okay. So today, we're going to provide a little roadmap of what we're going to talk about today. Our goal here really is to get you acquainted with fear. So we want to have you sort of get a sense of what does it look like in your family? What is fear like for you in particular? A lot of the reactions that we have to fear, as Dr. Ferzetti brought up, are hardwired, they're ingrained, and they're actually pretty adaptive. They keep us safe. And of course, when we act in ineffective ways in response to the fear over time, we have unwanted outcomes that kind of go against our goals. So we're going to talk a lot about what fear is, what can it look like in families and different family members in particular. So really understanding how it might show up for you as a parent versus a sibling and other people in the family. And then finally, what can we begin to do when we're afraid? So we're going to talk about specific skills and strategies that will get us to a better place with our fear.
So in order to really get acquainted with fear, which is really, you're going to see this, it's a central way to regulate emotions, right? And that is to sort of make friends with them. It's not like we love having them, but they're going to show up anyways. And the more we get to know them, the more we get familiarized with them, the more we are able to regulate them. So that's going to be this workshop. This workshop is, and you're all very brave for joining us, this workshop is about getting a little acquainted with our fear and the ways in which fear shows up so that we can get to recognize it and realize that as we recognize it, it doesn't hold the power that maybe it did. So this mindfulness practice is a short one. We're going to start with this quickly because we have a lot to cover. And what we would like to do is for you to sort of participate in this moment in a quick reflection ask yourself in this moment, and maybe Ali, I'm going to start by asking you, right? But ask yourself in this moment, what is making you slightly uncomfortable or very uncomfortable or anxious or scared or worried? But in this moment, right? It might be a thought of something in the past. It might be a thought about something in the future. It might be here and now. What is causing you? So ask yourselves, what is causing you anxiety? And you are welcome to jot that down in the chat. But first, Ali, just sort of give us an example of perhaps what are you noticing a little bit of worry or anxiety about?
Sure. So I'm noticing just a little bit of anxiety about making sure that my presentation is clear and that everybody understands me well. So I would say I'd put it at about a 4 out of 10.
4 out of 10. Great.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that I was at a 2 out of 10 about technology, but that 2 has now become more like a 5. I hope technology cooperates. So for all of you, if you wouldn't mind, maybe not all of you, but if you care to, write down one thing that in the chat, one thing that you're sort of feeling some anxiety, some worry, some discomfort about. And now I'm going to ask you to notice what it feels like in your body. Where do you feel it? Maybe you feel it like a little buzz in your brain. Maybe it's in your throat. It can be in more than one place. Maybe your hands got a little cold or not. Some of us feel it in our feet or in our legs, right? Shoulders maybe got tight. Do a quick body scan, right? This is what discomfort, fear might look like for you. It's a little flag that you're planting. Next, I would like you to think about what is your brain telling your body to do? What do you feel like doing? Do you feel like switching workshops? Do you feel like writing a whole paragraph in the chat room? Do you feel like, what do you feel like doing? Are you feeling activated? Are you feeling a little more paralyzed? Are you sort of wanting to disengage, which could be, I mean, that's a fabulous emotion, the emotion of, it's not really emotion, but a state of mind of boredom, which could be a sign that fear is coming up, right? So what are you noticing? What is your body feeling like you like doing? And then what is your mind doing? Is your mind going in circles? Is your mind trying to reassure you right now? It'll be fine. There won't be any more technology issues. Or is your mind sort of like on high alert? Each of us responds differently. There is no one way to respond to fear. Okay. And now I would like to take this a step farther. I'm going to take it to the next slide. There we go. And think of a time where maybe there was conflict that brought up a little bit of fear, a little bit of worry. I'm not looking, we're doing this step by step. We're just increasing the pressure a little bit here. When there was a conflict with your loved one, right? And when concern or worry came up. Maybe you remember what happened, or maybe, which would be pretty cool, you could remember one of those things we looked at on the previous slide, like one of those physical sensations or your brain doing one of these things. Do you remember that happening, and can you connect with that maybe, right? So similarly, think about what happened. What was that moment? What went down? What was that conflict? And what did it feel like to you? How did it affect you? How did you incorporate this into the moment? How did you respond based on that? Did you address it? Did you take time? There is not necessarily a right or a wrong way. What did you do? What were you pulled to do? And thinking back even higher, what were some of the causes of the conflict, right? So for sure, if there was a conflict with someone, you're thinking, well, they fill in the blank. But think about where you were. Did you have some vulnerabilities? Were you struggling? What were some of those causes? And it's absolutely not about pointing finger at all. This is all about getting to know what gets us in this place of fear. All right. And of course, if there's any questions about what we're talking about, feel free to post them in the chat, and we'll do our best to sort of keep an eye on it.
So why is fear so important? If you're somebody who has a lot of anxiety or you're worried a lot, you probably wish that you could just get rid of fear altogether. I know for myself that if I could just make anxiety go away, sometimes I would, right? I'd be like, okay, sure, I'd love to just not worry about anything. And at the same time, fear is so incredibly important. It's a very, very important emotion. It's actually the responses to it are really adaptive. And there are pretty common and hardwired responses that you might be familiar with, including fighting or fleeing, freezing or getting paralyzed or dissociating, or even fawning, which is sort of like people pleasing or trying to make things okay. And all of these different responses help us get to safety, right? So while fear can be really unpleasant, it doesn't feel good, it actually keeps us very, very safe. It gets us out of dangerous situations. It activates us, right? And if we didn't have fear, we might find ourselves in a lot of dangerous situations. Like we wouldn't survive for very long without fear. So it's very, very important. At the very same time, as human beings, our systems really evolved way, way better to handle this sort of like acute, fire burning, tiger chasing after us kind of fear, as opposed to the chronic kind of ongoing, uneasy feelings we have in our families and dealing with people who have mental illness. It's not that well suited to handling this chronic fear that we deal with. And in fact, unfortunately, what our brains do is it sees all sorts of fear-related stimuli as sort of the same. So it might see a tiger and see that kind of thing as just as scary as seeing your loved one and seeing their face kind of look a little bit uneasy. And what does that really mean? Our systems tend to adapt in a very similar way, kind of regardless of what we're seeing. And that's kind of an issue, right? Because we don't often know what to do whenever we're encountering this chronic fear all the time. And it ends up making us not that equipped to handle these sort of unpredictable, uncertain moments. And so while our system's great at handling these chronic things, not so good at these sort of ongoing issues. And you can see how we're really predisposed to being anxious as a result of this built-in system that we have. So we talked about sort of what are these ingrained responses, the fleeing, the fighting, the freezing, the fawning. And those are very, very natural responses, right? But the problem is, as humans, and I guess it's not so much a problem, it's just the way our minds work, that we want to avoid emotional pain, any kind of pain, at all cost. Human beings do not like pain, right? And so for a lot of people, and me included, and most people, when we have an emotion that's uncomfortable, we want to get rid of it, right? Like we don't want to stick with that feeling. We don't want to feel it. Oh my gosh. And so there's a lot of things we do that are ineffective in response to the fear. And actually Alan's presentation was fantastic as sort of a precursor to this, because I think you guys might have a better understanding as to why some of these responses are ineffective, but I'll talk a little bit more about why they're ineffective in just a minute. But see if you can recognize any of these responses in yourself. So I don't know, ignoring, denying, minimizing that the fear is there altogether. So I'm fine, nothing's wrong, it's okay. Just ignoring it, not even noticing it. Replacing it with a different emotion. So a lot of times acting angry or irritable when what we're feeling is really, really scared. Numbing it, sometimes with substances, checking out. Overthinking it, evaluating it, ruminating it. I don't know about you, but that's one of my brain's favorite strategies, is to sift through all the different possible things that could go wrong and what were all the things that did go wrong and how could I fix it in the future. It's exhausting. Judging ourselves as bad or the situation, trying to control the situation or control the people in it so nothing bad happens. And sometimes just avoiding the bad thing altogether, right? Just like, I don't want to go there, so I'm just going to avoid it. This is too scary. Those are some pretty common ineffective responses. So why are these ineffective? I just got done talking about how as humans, we are predisposed to not want to feel fear. So why the heck would it be ineffective to do all those things, right? If like, it's bad to feel it, we don't like feeling it. So why would we go towards them? What we know though, is if we act on those sort of ineffective responses, we might end up making the problem worse. So we know for sure that emotions love themselves. Our emotions are pretty much always trying to make us make more of them, basically. Fear wants us to make more fear. Sadness wants us to make more sadness. And how do we make more fear? We do exactly what the fear tells us to do, without question, without using our reasoning, without stopping to check if the situation is actually inherently dangerous, without checking to see if right now we're actually in danger. So this could look a little bit like going to a social gathering, and the minute you start to feel kind of uneasy, you leave, right? The social gathering itself isn't inherently dangerous. Nothing bad is actually going to happen to you. It's pretty uncomfortable. I think we've all been there. And running away is actually doing the very thing that the fear is telling you to do. And all this does in the long run is make you more and more afraid of social situations in the future. In fact, reflexively escaping, numbing, avoiding, or just acting on the fear, it makes it a lot worse. It just gets stronger. What it does is it means that the next time you go near that thing that seems scary, your fear reaction is going to be stronger. In reality, and many of us are often surprised to learn this, emotions in and of themselves, and this is along the line of a bit of what Alan was saying as well, they don't last very long. If we don't do anything to the emotions, they will go down on their own. And sometimes we need a little skill help to get us there, but they won't last long without us acting on it or furthering it. And so by escaping or numbing, we're actually depriving our mind the opportunity to see that the emotions will go away on their own. And there are some consequences to this ongoing ineffective acting on fear. So one of them is an ineffective communication. So if we aren't accurate about our fear, it's really hard to communicate about it, right? And on top of that, things like depression and anxiety disorders, PTSD, can really come out of chronically and ineffectively responding to fear. So these are really, really important that we get a clear understanding of what our fear is telling us and then what to do about it.
All right. So in order to be able to look at the fear, right, in order to do what Ali just said, which sounds pretty cool, right? If we do nothing, the fear goes away. Really? Well, a lot of us, and I was looking at the chat, a lot of us say, well, we think about the same thing over and over again, and we worry over, yeah, we call that refiring the emotion. The same thought will bring up the same emotion. So some of you are talking in the chat room about being very, very worried about your loved one, and you have very solid reasons to be worried about your loved one, right? So you're having some thoughts about that, and the thoughts bring up fear because it would be lovely to fix. And of course, it cannot be fixed. So the emotion comes down a little bit, and then you have the thought again. The emotion spikes up again. And what we need to do is to be able to not refire, to allow the fear, to look at the fear, so that, as Alan was saying earlier, we can hold it, know it's there, and move on. Recognize it, make friends with it, and move on. So how do we get to know our own fear? We get to know our own fear because we get to know what fear feels like in our body. And for some of you, it might have been just a hint of a physical feeling earlier when we were doing this practice. Others might be very aware of what their body tells you. And there's no right or wrong. But for those of you whose body are not very chatty, don't talk very much, practice. You will see that some signals come again and again connected with the emotion of fear. So notice what fear feels like. Notice what you do when you're afraid. Again, a hint might have been in the exercise we did just earlier. Do you hide the fact that you're afraid, uneasy, worried? Or do other people know it? Right. So I was telling Ali that when I'm afraid, there is this weird thing that happens for me. Weird, I'm judging, but my teeth clench. When I'm afraid, I clench my teeth. And so people who know me well know that I'm afraid when they see my jaw clench, right? Which is not necessarily super noticeable, but dead giveaway. Yeah. So how do other people know that you're afraid? Do you have stigma about fear? A lot of us think that, we shouldn't be afraid. We're not courageous if we're afraid. We're not brave if we're afraid. And of course, many of you know that that is not true. Courage is actually feeling afraid and doing what you need to do about the fear. But what are your stigma? What stigma do you have about fear, if any? And then, really importantly, again, we're not looking to point fingers. This is not helpful. But what did you learn about fear in your family of origin? Did you have parents who were very stoic, who just didn't show fear? Or did you have parents who were quite anxious, or one parent who was quite anxious? And how was that sort of evidenced by them? And how did other people respond to that fear? Right? So get to know that landscape of fear that oftentimes we turn away from, because when we don't feel fear, why would we want to think about it? And when we do feel fear, we want it to stop. So let's talk a little bit more about the kind of fears that, that might show up in families. And this continues to be a little bit of an uncomfortable exercise. And Ali and I thought of a lot of different kinds of scenarios. I am not going to go through all of them for the sake of time, but as you read through them, notice which ones are particularly poignant for you, perhaps, and make a commitment, if you would, after today, although after today you'll be tired, but at some point, maybe before the end of the weekend, to come back to this slide and to take a look at each of these statements and sort of notice the fear landscape that is associated with them. So I am going to read the first one because that one we see sometimes and it is particularly worrisome, right? My loved one is hitting my other child. What fear comes up with that? And notice that it might not just be fear. There may be anger, there may be other emotions that are sort of bubbling there. But it is a scary situation. How do you respond to that? What is your body telling you? What are you wanting to do? What are some of the thoughts that come up? For siblings or other members of the family, it's selfish for me to go have fun with my friends when my parents are struggling with my sister or my brother and everybody is so upset. What kind of fear comes up? What kind of thoughts? I'm going to pass a few. My loved one, or the next one, my mom, has been isolating. They've been in bed all day. I'm not hearing from them. They're struggling. I don't know what to do. What kind of fear is that? How about having to get the police involved once again? We've called them many times and they've been supportive. And the same situation is occurring again. What's that emotion around fear? Physical sensations, thoughts, body sensations, the stigma of what is going on in your family. You know, the casserole example that Alan was giving. Not only other people not caring that much or not connecting with us as we're going through crises, but us feeding into that and saying, look, I can't let people know what's going on in my house. And whether it's about your child or your sibling, not wanting to share. And then, of course, self-harm and suicide, so scary. So scary. Some of us get very paralyzed. Some of us get very activated. What are the feelings? What are the thoughts? Do you literally catch your breath? Do you feel your heart sort of skipping a beat? All right. So I am going to show you others. This is one that I remember that was so poignant, a mom who said this to me. And this was like the core of her fear on a daily basis, the repetitive sound of her loved one banging her head against the mirror upstairs. If there are some particular fears that you feel that are not represented in some way here, go ahead and write that in the chat. We'd be very interested in adding that. Okay. So then, of course, if we look at members of families, how do we accommodate all this fear? This is a whole lot of fear that I was just talking about. And it comes from a variety of contexts in a variety of circumstances. For our purpose today, we're only going to look at parents and at siblings. And I'm going to sort of ask you guys, particularly those of you who are parents, but those of you who are siblings also, what do you think your parents do? Right? So there's this big sentence, when you're going through hell, just keep going. So if you don't know what to do, you're going to keep trying the same thing because that's the only thing you know to do. So is that what happens? When you feel fear, you just keep trying, because what else are you going to do? And you don't know what else to do. So you keep trying what ultimately does not work. Do you observe parents pretending that they're not scared? Because my goodness, if parents are scared, then everything falls apart. Do parents accommodate, or do they take distance? Do you, as part of accommodation, do you sometimes accept blame that is not really justified? Do you as a parent focus on your loved one very, very much when the fear comes up? Do you become irritable? Do you just get stuck, so paralyzed because you don't know what to do? Do you hide from your potential support because stigma, right? You don't want to talk about it. And yet, when we feel fear, we're social. Other people can really help us.
So I'm going to talk about a slightly less traditionally focused on group, but still really important, and that's siblings. And I was really inspired to talk about the sibling perspective. And it was pretty exemplified by a client of mine who said to me that she really wished that her parents had seen her as scared throughout this process, that actually during the experience with her loved one, her sibling who had BPD, she really realized that people didn't notice that she was actually pretty afraid. And so there are actually pretty common patterns that I observe in my work with siblings of people with BPD. And some of them might look really similar to what parents do as well. And some of them are potentially a bit different. So irritability, acting annoyed, why can't everyone just stop yelling? Annoyance at parents for handling things in ways that the kids don't like. Making themselves small, taking up really no space whatsoever, and really it's to not burden the family, right? Because the family's already going through so much. And so you often see siblings not really talking about their needs, not noticing that they have needs to begin with, not expressing them, really just kind of, I guess, walking on eggshells really to keep everything sort of okay. You might notice a bit of withdrawal or shutting down, some depression, so hiding in their room, not really participating in much. Some caregiving or taking over adult responsibilities can happen. A lot of time I hear from siblings who just really don't like to see their parents suffering and their other family members suffer. And so they find themselves kind of jumping in and taking over responsibilities of sort of tasks in the home, but also emotional responsibilities as well. And that can lead to things like parentification and triangulation, which is sometimes role reversals and things like that can happen just because everyone's trying the best they can, and it's really confusing, and this is one of those things that can happen. Another way that fear can express itself in siblings is perfectionism and overachievement. So, the kid can't actually control what's going on in the family. So what do? They control their appearance, they control their grades, they control how well they're doing other things. You might notice a lot of overachievement or acting strong. Escaping to hang out with their friends, leaving the house quite a bit. Their own paralysis, so getting really kind of unsure and numb and sort of dissociated. And then unfortunately, a lot of the consequences of this kind of dysregulated fear in siblings is this excessive guilt and shame that they often take on, which is this feeling of, what can I do, right? Like there has to be something I can do. And that's a pretty human thing, right? When we're scared, we want something to do. And what's a natural emotion that gives us something to do? Guilt. So very commonly, you'll have siblings express and feel quite a bit of guilt and shame. So I'm curious, in our audience here, whether if there are any siblings in the present, if there's anything that we missed here, if any of these resonate with you in particular, if any parents notice this in their other children.
I'm also curious, building on this, Ali, if parents who are in our audience right now might be thinking, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Thank guys, you just added this whole nother layer. And I just want to thank you for hearing us and being here, because every morning when you get up, you just want to do the best that you can as parents, as family members, you do. And you want that for your loved one who struggles so much and so evidently. And of course, you want that for your other siblings, for your other children as well, for the siblings. And it's just like for fear, it's just like for any emotion. In order to do something, we have to know about the something. And here we are talking about that. So I think there's a few chat responses, and I'll let you take a look at them, Ali. But what do? We've stirred the fear pot. We've done the most important part. We really have said to you, there is a fear landscape, and exploring it is the best thing you can do. And hopefully we've made a good case to encourage you to look at all the slides that we've given you already and really explore your fear landscape. But now we're going to take on a little bit more of a DBT hat, and we're going to talk about what we can do to regulate fear from a DBT perspective. So so let's start with, there's 4 modules in DBT, here they are. And Ali, you're going to start with the mindfulness part, right?
Yes. So this one is actually really hard. In fact, it might be one of the hardest ones. If you've had a history of sort of minimizing your fear or reacting in a way that's not congruent with the emotion, it might be really, really hard to notice your fear and even know that it's happening, right? But the first step is to just detect it. Notice the fear. Pay attention to your body sensations. Where is your attention? What is the content of your thoughts? Is it moving really fast? What are you thinking about right now? You have to be able to detect it to be able to know what to do with it. Pay attention to what you feel like doing. Do you feel like running upstairs and checking on your loved one? Do you feel like ignoring it? And label it. Label that you're noticing the fear. Label the urge that you're having. So I'm noticing fear. I have the urge to fix this. It might seem really silly to kind of draw it out like that. But otherwise, without really paying attention to it, we're at risk of just skipping over it and reacting mindlessly to the fear. And finally, be very curious about it. So what is the threat? Like, why is your mind responding to this? It must think something's threatening. So what is it? And let go of those judgments of it being good or bad to be afraid right now. You just are, right? You're afraid, and that's okay. So what happens though, if you go to do those beautiful steps that we just talked about in step 1? So you're trying to notice it, you're all zen, trying to feel your feelings, notice what's going on, and you just have no idea what you're feeling. I know that's happened to me before, where I really try to be mindful and my mind is just moving way too fast to be able to get a hold of it. So that's a pretty good sign that you need distress tolerance skills. If your fear is so intense you can't think clearly or you're panicking, you've got to use some distress tolerance skills first. Now, the purpose of these skills isn't just like an end in of themselves. Like, it's not like you're just going to use these skills for the rest of eternity and be done. The skills here are really to get you so that you can do something else effective with it. And some of our favorite skills are the stop skill, which have been referenced throughout this workshop today. But there's the skills within that is to stop, take a step back, observe what's around you, proceed mindfully, don't do anything. Use some distraction to pay attention to something else just for a bit so that your distress can come down. Do something physical, so move your body. This really helps calm your nervous system. This could be a 10-minute walk outside. This could be going to the gym. So these are a variety of things that you can do. So you can actually go back to step one and really focus on the noticing and the detecting of the emotion.
What we've done is we've talked about noticing the fear and allowing the fear, and getting to this place where you allow it so much that you're able to move to the next step. This was really the most important slide that I wanted to still share with you. The next step is to either solve it or regulate it. And it's really important that we remember that if you've noticed it and you've not run away from it, at that point, things happen really fast. The question you want to ask yourself is there imminent danger? If there is imminent danger as defined by harm to yourself or harm to others, thank you so much, Ali. If there's harm to self or harm to others, we're going to go to the next slide and quickly talk about what to do. Thank you. So that is that slide you will have, and that's your imminent danger protocol. Observe and describe what is going on. You are holding a knife. Your door has been closed for 3 days. I just heard you threaten that you were going to kill yourself or say that you are suicidal. You observe and describe. You state the desired outcome. I need you to put the plate down. I need you to commit to being safe. Okay, step 3. If the answer to that is no, validate. It's really hard right now. You're suffering a great deal right now. And what I'm asking you to do is imperative. You have to do it. If you can't, I understand. We'll need to call for help. And you call for help, right? We do need to get rid of the imminent danger. If the desired outcome does occur, the plate gets put down. Your loved one says, no, I'm okay, I'm safe. I'm not going to engage in any self-harm. Then ask for commitment. Can you stay safe until tonight or until tomorrow? And then check in. If the answer is no, I can't stay safe, then you come back to, we need to call for help. Okay? So can you go back to the previous slide, do you think?
It's actually Erin who's in charge.
Oh, Erin, thank you so much. Thank you. So that falls into the solving it, right? Once you have solved, and again, we all know how fast it goes, but you need to stay focused like a laser on removing imminent danger. Once imminent danger is out of the way, or if there was no imminent danger, because we create our own fears, then of course regulate it. Practice mindfulness of your emotion of fear, as we have practiced earlier in this workshop. Practice opposite action, acting opposite to fear. Everything that fear tells you to do, run away, stay, look away, face, hide, engage, right? Act opposite to whatever the fear. For me, my jaw, relax my jaw. Everything that sends a message to the brain, no, we're doing the opposite of this in this moment. And then activate your behavior, meaning, and that's what Alan talked about when he said, get curious. Look at what's going on and get curious. All right. I have about 2 more hours of stuff to say on this slide, but let's move ahead. So go ahead. 2 slides ahead, I guess.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about communicating it. Communicating and bringing fear language into the conversation.
Everybody, shut up!
Oh, Marie Paul, it seems like you're a little upset right now. Huh, I wonder what you mean by that. So
I'm nervous right now.
yeah,
The
you're
yelling
a
is
little
really
nervous
scary.
right now. Yeah, exactly. So with this, we really want to focus on being clear, being accurate, being direct with our communication, and using language of fear to bring in that more vulnerable, open, clear dialogue.
Why can't we sit down to a peaceful dinner?
What she might mean is, I worry we won't make it through dinner without yelling.
You always leave.
I'm scared that you're not okay, Dad.
No one gets it.
I'm afraid that no one will understand what this is like.
I'll be fine.
I'm afraid too. So once we've expressed it and talked about fear, we actually have to give our loved ones information about what they can do. So if we just express our feelings without actually telling them what we can do, it kind of leaves them in the dark, and that sort of impedes communication. So in addition to communicating by expressing the fear, we actually have to make our needs known in the form of a request or clarifying and asserting our needs. So for example, Marie Paul.
I'm getting out of here. I can't take this.
Might mean I need to go take a few minutes to breathe. I'll be back.
You are being manipulative.
What do you mean by what you just said? Can you please tell me more?
No one could possibly understand this.
Could I also see a therapist?
I'll just shut up.
Please talk to me using a different tone.
All right, so that conflict that we talked about earlier, that simple conflict that you might have had with your loved one, nothing big, nothing, something that came to mind. Can you apply this? Can you cut and paste all this fear that we have just talked about, all these facets of fear to the conflict? So notice it. Where did fear show up in the moment? Like somebody Ali and I know very well talks about sitting on the couch, relaxing, and then hearing her son's bedroom door open, and fear. Nothing has happened. The door opened and fear just like, right? For you, where was the fear? What was the threat? For her, it was, he's going to come down and ask me all sorts of things. Well, it hadn't happened yet, right? How might you bring curiosity and non-judgment to that moment instead of what happened? Second step, tolerate it. Notice the fear, recognize it, name it. It's fear. I can tolerate it. Is it tolerable? Do you need a minute to bring it down so that you can tolerate it? If it was dangerous, if there was imminent danger, did you need to engage in some safety steps? If there wasn't, could you regulate? And step 4, what we just did, how could you communicate it more effectively? By naming it. Thanks, Erin. So now next slide.
So I hope that we have made a good case for talking about fear, bringing fear language into the conversation, being accurate about our fear, and facing our fear. Being scared can be very scary to talk about, and I, for one, find it to be very worth it. It really acknowledges our fallibility. It brings vulnerability to the conversation. It helps us solve problems in a more clear-eyed kind of way. It gives us a common language. It keeps us connected and brings us together. And importantly, for those of us who don't want to be feeling fear all the time, it brings down the fear.
Thank you for participating in this workshop. We really, really appreciate it. I do feel a little bit of worry that we left you exactly 4 minutes to take a break, get up, stretch. before the next session, but I hope that this was helpful to you. And our email addresses are at the start of, are on the first page of the slide deck if you have any questions at all.
Thank
And
you
thank
so
you
much.
for your comments and your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.